So, for a while now, Mojang has had a vested interest in using Minecraft, their platform, as a way to promote eco-friendly and pro-conservation efforts, using it as an opportunity to add endangered animals as mobs and raise awareness for current conservation efforts. From the community, I've heard opposition to this idea mostly boil down to this mob is useless. In other words, there is no mechanical benefit to interacting with this mob, and because it has no explicit use, it cannot justify its own existence. I'm of two minds about this. Firstly, I don't think a feature which lacks utility is an inherently bad thing. I really like poisonous potatoes in spite of their complete lack of utility. I like seeing polar bears when I explore the tundra, and I like finding turtles scuttle on the beach. In real life, many animals don't have an explicit use. They don't produce a resource that has extrinsic value for humanity. That doesn't make their existence worthless. I actually think it puts the onus on us, that in spite of any material benefit, it's our job to understand why this creature has value. But I can't argue with the sentiment. A feature that lacks hard mechanical benefits is a wasted one. Today I want to talk about the ways we can make animals useful. Not just in a direct mechanical sense, but more specifically, to rework them to serve a greater goal, to make Minecraft more ecological. First, I want to talk about why ecology in Minecraft doesn't work, and what ecology actually is. And I want to take a pre-existing mob and try and redesign them to make them more about ecology. And ultimately, why Minecraft, at least in its current state, can never really be about ecology. I think Minecraft in its current state wears a veneer of ecology. I think this is most apparent in its food chain, and I use that word very generously. In my survivor world, I've been making a tundra, and I wanted to bring in real-world tundra-dwelling animals to populate it. Arctic hares, Arctic foxes, wolves, and polar bears. Unfortunately, I forgot about the most annoying mechanic that exists in this game. Predators. My foxes began to kill my rabbits, and as I was trying to wrangle them, the wolves then killed the foxes and any rabbits that remained. In that moment, I suddenly realized how absolutely broken this system is. I've always been aware of the problems Minecraft predators have, that if you live in an area with foxes, you will never find any chickens. Ever. If you live in an area with wolves, you better find all the foxes you can right now, because if you wait a few nights, there will no longer be any. But when I witnessed the horrible massacre of 20 rabbits in front of my eyes, I realized something more upsetting. They didn't even pick up the meat. This wolf, not out of survival, not out of hunger, out of spite and an affinity for ethnic cleansing I don't even want to think about, demolished this entire population of rabbits in seconds. This is not hunting. This is not how a predator acts. This is how a state who doesn't like this color of person very much acts. I can't have a functioning ecosystem in my world. There is no game rule to disable animal murder. There is no chance for me to mimic and replicate real-life trophic levels. Passive mobs rarely spawn, and they have no recourse to being hunted. In real life, rabbits breed on their own to keep their populations high enough to resist extinction. In Minecraft, they just go extinct. The reason I use the food chain as my primary example is because that's the only thing I can think of where an animal does something in Minecraft. And I think animals doing things is the core of ecology. So before we go into the changes I want to make, I want to talk about what ecology actually is. Not the scientific field, not really. I want to focus on the fantasy of ecology, what a player would expect and want from an ecology-based game. When I was studying ecology in uni, the thing I kept coming back to, the thing that always blew my mind, were feedback loops. The idea that in this complex system, one population of a species modifies some factor, biotic or abiotic, living or dead, and it has a direct influence on almost all other species. That the only reason so many plants can grow in our soil is due to a small number of nitrogen-fixing bacteria. That they rely on each other and compete with each other and help each other. That's the fantasy, interconnectedness, emergent behaviors, resources to be exchanged and used in vastly different ways by many different species. With that, I made 3 design principles for guiding this ecology-based design. Firstly, feedback loops. Messing with the environment should matter. Your actions have a real effect on everything else living in your world, and their actions should have a real effect on you. However, in keeping with Minecraft's design, I think that particular direction should have less weight. Yes, the environment should have some influence on you, but never too much that it causes the player to be annoyed. They should think, of course that would happen, why did I do that? Not, seriously? This isn't fair. Players should always blame themselves, never the world. Another way to put this is that environmental actors do things. Resource exchange. Feedback loops are facilitated by resource exchange. You offer something to an environmental actor, and they offer something in return. This is the core of the incentive structure for ecology-based design. You should get something for being a good steward. Conservation. We need to be careful when designing incentives to make sure that the most optimal action for the players is the most humane, eco-friendly, and beautiful action. We want to encourage players to build, to conserve, and to improve the habitats for local species. In its current state, Mojang does nothing to disincentivize players from being cruel. They do nothing to make factory farms reprehensible. I'm sorry, but this should not be a normal thing advanced players do. Mojang treats the environment as a resource to be exploited, not a partner to work in tandem with. I think this has two major effects. The most obvious is that it means cruel actions are rewarded. Who cares if your villagers are confined to a 1-meter space to spend the rest of their days in? After all, you aren't getting any benefit from giving them space. If anything, giving them freedom only hurts you. So, of course you would lock them up. But I think the bigger problem is that casual players are also hurt by this system. Using intuition to solve problems in Minecraft doesn't really work. We would intuit that a large pasture for letting animals graze would be more rewarding for us, that treating them better would make them feel better, will make them more productive. But this isn't true. We would assume that bringing over species into a desolate area would allow that area to thrive, that greater biodiversity will only have good effects. This isn't true. So, if we moved forward with this model, with ecology-based design, what would Minecraft look like under that philosophy? With the idea that the things living within this world actually lived, and that our livelihoods actually depended upon them. Design principles are great, but they only have utility if we can use them. So I wanted to take a mob that I think has a lot of ecologic potential and see how far we can push it. Currently, bats are ambient mobs that spawn occasionally and are meant only to add atmosphere to caves, which isn't a bad thing. They were added for a specific purpose and they fulfill it. However, I think bats have the opportunity to be so much more. I'm from Texas, and here bats serve a very important function in our ecosystem in a way that directly benefits humans. Cotton has been one of Texas' most important exports for a long time, and one of the biggest hurdles we face during production are pests. Boll weevils are a parasite that lays its eggs inside of and eats cotton bolls. A lot of money and research has been put into finding better pesticides to ward boll weevils, though all of this with the only goal to make more cotton. If the pesticides cause deleterious effects towards the ecosystem or local environment, no one cares. Farmers need to turn a profit this year to feed their family and pay off their mortgage. They don't have the resources to fund research into alternative methods. They only need a turnaround. Which brings us to bats. Bats find boll weevils absolutely delicious, and for a while now, they've helped to keep boll weevil populations manageable. But since the semi-arid plains have become more and more habited, and due to a recent bat illness, bat populations in Texas have plummeted. As people expand farmland and put up streetlights, bats have more food than ever, but can't find anywhere suitable to live. Kicked out of their home, bats could be a useful ally in our economic interests. Insectivorous bats produce guano, which is mostly a powder-like feces made almost entirely of chitin, an excellent source of nitrogen normally unavailable to plants. Better than that, the rate at which these bats produce guano is so vast that it can be sustainably harvested, though usually it isn't. With this knowledge, how can we modify the game's incentive structure to support the fantasy of ecology and encourage in-game interactions with bats that mimic eco-friendly interactions in real life? I think the solution is actually pretty intuitive. Bats are no longer ambient mobs. they are passive, spawn once on world generation, and only spawn near the entrances to caves. On spawn, bats are assigned to a colony, a bat roost, which would work similarly to a villager workstation. One block that all bats in that colony remember as their home. During the day, bats will stay in their caves and sleep, only getting up if provoked. But at night, they will fly in massive flocks, eventually dispersing to eat insects off of grass. However, all bats will prioritize farm crops. After finding crops in an area, they will remember this and share the location of the farmland with other bats when it goes back to the roost that morning. They are intelligent animals. They can't write Shakespeare, but they know how to tell their buddies if food is nearby. Similar to bees, bats pollinate crops, causing random bone meal buffs when eating insects off of them. After feeding on crops, when bats return to their roost, they will produce guano on the floor below them. Guano piles up on the cave floor and can be harvested by the player. Guano can be made into its corresponding block, acts as an alternative to bone meal, and can be crafted into brown dye. Guano can also be smelted into gunpowder, providing a way for casual players to obtain gunpowder without the need for a creeper farm, and giving peaceful players access to a very limited resource. I do not believe this change would bypass the need for creeper farms. While harvesting guano is a good source of gunpowder, I do not believe this system would keep up with the demand more technical players have for the material, allowing creepers and bats to provide the same critical resource without interfering on each other's niche. Guano can also be used to make a new block, the mushroom farm. The mushroom farm is set with a specific species, and after some time can be harvested, not only for its corresponding fungus, but also harder to obtain items. For example, glow lichen can be grown in mushroom farms to provide glow ink sacs, a material casual players have a hard time obtaining. Mushroom farms can be sped up by providing rotten flesh, fibrous wood, things only decomposers are able to digest. However, the player needs to be careful when harvesting guano. In real life, if too much guano is removed from a cave, the bats will leave the cave and find a new area to roost. Likewise, if too much guano is removed in-game, the bats will die, and the roost will become abandoned. Due to their insectivorous nature, bats will scare away and occasionally attack spiders close to their roost, as well as spiders close to farmland they eat from. Bats also prevent any phantoms from spawning in the area. I wanted to add the phantom mechanic not because I think phantoms are giant bugs, but because we need to be mindful when implementing these changes, to incentivize the player to act the way we want. We want the player to stay up and let the bats feed on the crops they've planted. Players are much less likely to do so if they are haunted by phantoms at night. In fact, I would go so far as to allow bats a general mob dampening effect whenever they are in the area, reducing mob spawns drastically when near the player. We want the player to focus on the bats and the unique interactions they have at night, enjoy seeing them come from the darkness. Mobs would only serve to ruin that effect, and leave players, especially casual players, frustrated and scared to spend a night away from their bed. Besides bats, crops now bolts will left alone for too long. Bolted crops can be pollinated by bees and make bats happier. Bolted crops spread on their own, as long as fallow farmland is nearby, but bolted crops drop less vegetables and more poisonous variants. All crops can be frozen at a particular growth stage when snipped with shears, so if you like baby wheat, you can keep it small forever. Right before bolting, crops drop significantly more vegetables, so a player with a small farm who takes care of it well will produce just as much crop as a massive plantation run poorly. Also, if bats attempt to bone meal a section of fallow farmland, a random plant can grow there instead. So a player who doesn't have access to carrots, but does have bats, can suddenly begin to plant them. This encourages players to make small, more meticulously thought out and cared for farms instead of massive fields or a single-tilled dirt block that they spam bone meal on. The real beauty, I think, is that casual players who already play this way will be rewarded. Rewarded for taking care of their small farms, and rewarded for designing them with bats in mind. The idea of independent entities, animals, plants, the environment doing things on its own accord, is fundamentally opposed to the core design guidelines for this game. Mr. Jeb does not want things in the world to happen without input from the player. And not because the team is stupid or because Jeb is short-sighted. It's for a good reason. It can be annoying. If you spend time meticulously placing grass on your landscape, each variant short and tall the way you want it, it's annoying when you leave and come back and the grass has been eaten by sheep. It isn't fun for people who focus on building in this way. Of course, we can imagine workarounds for these things, right? Snipping grass to make it unable to be eaten by animals. But I think either way, the point is moot. I love the game the Minecraft team is making, but that game is dependent on what the team wants, what Mojang wants. So even if Mojang wanted to implement ecologies, how would they go about that whilst maintaining their current guidelines? I don't think you can. I don't think it's possible to have the environment feel alive whilst the environment simultaneously does nothing. I hear people complain about their bases not feeling alive. I don't think that's just because they don't have enough animals around, or that there aren't enough animations or particles. I think it's because it is truly dead. It is dead without player input. If there is no player, nothing would happen in this world. Nothing would change, nothing would grow and learn. It would just stay the same, forever. And I think there's a lot more potential to a living world than a stagnant one. If Mojang wants to solve the problem of their dead worlds, if in fact they even see it as a problem, their current design philosophy has to change. And I don't think that's going to happen. But is that a bad thing? I'm not convinced it is. Look, I would love pie, but Mojang is making cake. And it's good cake, I mean, it's great. I wouldn't play this game so much if I thought it was bad. I wouldn't make this video if I didn't like this game. I love it, and we complain about the things we love. Of course, I would love for Mojang to change their current design philosophy. I want living worlds with living ecologies. I mean, hell, living geologies. I think this game has amazing educational potential. I didn't even know Diorite existed until Minecraft added it 11 years ago. Jesus, 11 years. Mojang could use this as an opportunity to drive funding and research for this issue, as they have for pandas and bees. I think they could do real good for this species, and more than just adding them, make players realize why they're useful, see their effects on the crops, see what happens when you harvest too much guano, see why bats are more than Halloween-themed mammals. They're ecosystem heroes. There's something here, and I think the only thing stopping them is a fear that their primary demographic wouldn't be interested in it. I mean, would a bat update make numbers like the Creaking or the Nautilus? I mean, I think it would, but I'm very biased. The point is, Mojang has a platform, an excellent platform, to advocate for conservation efforts and ecological awareness. Minecraft and ecology would work so well together. I don't think it's a coincidence we see creators focused on the educational benefits of this game. Not just ecology, many different fields. I want to see Mojang take that next step, to become more intimately involved with promoting ecology as a field, conservation as an effort, games as an educational tool. But either they can't right now, or they won't. And I'm hoping buzz around this topic, about Minecraft as an educational tool, might afford Microsoft to give some leniency to Mojang, and allow them to do something more than just a block game. Something that has a real impact on our world.